All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher. Happy Louis Heel Day to those who celebrate. Not sure if Rudintik, my co-host, was participating in the festivities last night, but good to see you, Drew. Bright and early. We're going to talk about Cowboys-Commanders, Vikings-Bears, and Thursday Night Football, Steelers-Browns. Let's start off with the Cowboys, Drew, who are now 10.5-point underdogs in Washington. I don't know what the look ahead for this was before the season, but I'm guessing it was like Cowboys minus 4.5 or something. So a good 2-touchdown swing from that. The total is 45.5. Do you think that? So let's say the Panthers are probably still the worst team in football. Are the Cowboys the second worst?
Oh boy, they might be the worst. I don't think that's outside the scope. I mean,
Carolina's pretty bad.
They're pretty bad, but they're getting some reinforcements back. Yeah, Adam Thielen's off IR. They're not quitting on the season, whereas the whiffs out of Dallas are very much quitting on the season. The 4th and 16, go for it. Okay. As someone who had the under last night, the final 7-8 minutes of the way that really the whole second half of the way that game played out with the fumble touchdown that probably shouldn't have necessarily been allowed to go back. And then on top of that, the going for it on 4th and 16 turned around with the Texans determined to score an offensive touchdown, because apparently it's a thing that people have been saying they haven't been scoring in the second half. I guess I need to be listening to more Houston media to know what is making the Texans coaching staff tick, so that they're making decisions with 3 minutes to go, where they are putting Joe Mixon consistently in harm's way, trying to get maybe the second most important player after Nico Collins, of the skilled group, trying to get him hurt just so that they could score a touchdown, which took the game over. I'm over it, Jay. I'm over it. The Cowboys, I think, have realistic scope to be the worst in the NFL because of the lack of incentive at this point to put any of their kind of good pieces in harm's way. I think CeeDee Lamb and Michael Parsons are very realistic candidates to be put on the shelf for 2025. I think the injuries to the offensive line last night were meaningful. Now, some of the offensive line players who went out, Guyton and Martin in particular, were not playing especially well. But this is now almost an entire second unit. Tyler Smith matters. He was kind of holding that whole unit together. And so now you're going to have, rookies and young players across that whole unit ostensibly protecting Cooper Rush. It may be protecting Trey Lance at some point. I don't think Trey Lance is necessarily the answer. So there's scope for the Cowboys to be, 8 or 9 points worse than an average on a neutral as far as a fair rating here in the coming weeks. And that's amazing, because you know what, Jay? I set myself an alarm for today, preseason. Said bet the Cowboys in the NFC East. And the reason I did was because their schedule kind of breaks favorably down the stretch, but their season is over. So I think it's going to open up opportunities for teams like the Panthers, and we're going to see Panthers-Cowboys in a couple weeks. We're going to get our answer as to who is actually the worst power-rated team in the NFL. This next stretch coming up, they were supposed to get Commanders, who they were going to be, like you said, 3.5, 4-point favorites against. Giants on Thanksgiving, who they were supposed to be 8-point favorites against, followed by a small favorite against Cincinnati, and then meaningful favorite against the Panthers. And really the only game they have left on their schedule where they were supposed to be dogs was this against the Eagles. But now I think they are very likely to lose out and position themselves for the draft. And I think I don't know, this is like a failure of kind of coaching and development across the board here, because when you have kind of a stars and scrubs unit, the stars have gotten hurt, but they haven't been hurt all season. And when they were all out there together, this was still a team that had huge limitations and questions, and had some pretty awful performances, like the Saints game week 2. So there's obviously deeper problems with the way that the team is being schemed and coached. And I think ultimately that's where kind of the most intrigue is going to lie in the offseason, because there's a lot of jobs turning over in the NFL this year, and a lot of them aren't very good jobs. But the Cowboys' job is kind of held up as sort of one of the premier spots to coach in the NFL because of the support and the presumably the attention. But yeah, I don't really know, what the next step is for this Cowboys franchise. They should have a really relatively quick rebuild, considering they have three pillars that they can lean on, and again, they have a quarterback. Most times, when you are bottoming out, it is because your quarterback situation is untenable. And I still think Dak Prescott has top half of the NFL, kind of median expectation and top five NFL. Ceiling expectation if he can, kind of come back and, and be well protected, and they have more weapons than just CeeDee Lamb to go to on the offense. But right now, I think this is a very fair line. I think the Cowboys are, kind of realistically staring at kind of a bad spot at the worst time. Extra rest here for the Commanders, who are coming off of a pretty disappointing second half performance against the Eagles after a really impressive first half. This is kind of a get right spot for the Commanders, who have been scuffling lately and after just a brilliant start to their season. So the Commanders here kind of really flexing offensively, and I dare even say that the Texans did that last night. I mean, this is their chance to kind of truly, stop people from calling out Cliff Kingsbury, stop people from kind of pointing to Daniels and suggesting he's hit the rookie wall. And I think that's likely what's in the cards.
Yeah, indeed. I won't lie, I didn't watch a great deal of Cowboys-Texans after Cal Ripken read out Louis Hill's name. I passed out on the ground, and when I came through, I was more interested in Bucks-Rockets, give another Texas team a chance, than Cowboys-Commanders. But the thing with the Cowboys, who have now entered the just kind of comically woeful phase of their season, I think the thing to do when this kind of thing happens, and particularly when Prescott got ruled out, it's not to start loading up specifically against the Cowboys. It's to look at the rest of their schedule and see which other teams now take. I mean, the difference between Rush and Prescott, and also just what that signals for the rest of the team in terms of their outlook going forward. Like, the combination of the quarterback change and the fact that they're not going to be going all out to win. Like, if Micah Parsons has a niggle in week 17, he's just not going to play. Like, it's like a touchdown shift in the team's rating. And so that means that teams like, the Bengals get to play the Cowboys in week 14. That's a material uptick for their playoff chances. The Bucks get to play them in week 16, which would have been, if the Cowboys were at full strength, that game is going off around pick, and now the Bucks are going to be like 9-point favorites or whatever. Like, that's a material shift in the NFC South. The Commanders get to play them twice, which is such a boon to have the Cowboys in your division. And Dak Prescott plays half the season, and you don't have to see him once. Those games are not auto win, but now they're heavily favored to win those games. Even Philadelphia as well, getting them in week 17. That is now close to a layup in their pursuit of the 1 seed. So, not a great. We've gone a long way from the Cowboys being 7-point favorites against Jordan Love in the first week of the playoffs last year to where we are now. All right, before we get to Vikings-Bears, Notre Dame continues to march towards the college football playoff, and this Saturday night they will take on Army at Yankee Stadium. NBC and Peacock will lead you up to kickoff starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay, Vikings-Bears. Vikings 3.5-point favorites on the road at Chicago. The total is 39.5. Bears, a little more compelling of a team in this post-Waldron era, having looked relatively competent against the Packers in a game that they arguably should have won. Where are you at on the Vikings now that we've kind of had the full Sam Darnold experience in both directions? I think their defense has settled in as a properly elite unit, but how do you rate the Vikings offense currently?
I have Vikings as the 9th best in the NFL. That may sound high. Darnold certainly is kind of squarely average for me, but the weapons are amazing. And mostly looking at the passing weapons, I have some questions about Aaron Jones and health, but I have some questions about the run blocking, particularly in the absence of Darisaw. But the kind of translation from Darisaw to Cam Robinson was a downgrade, but not like a major, kind of all 5-alarm fire. So I think the protection is good enough. Darnold is good enough. Their scripted offense is amazing. Kevin O'Connell does a really nice job of preparing for an opponent. And when they can play with the lead, that unlocks Flores' ability to really make life living hell for the opposing quarterback. And the opposing quarterback in this matchup has been inclined to lean into life as hell this season. So I think this is a problem for Chicago. And the Vikings right now, I would put pretty clearly as the sixth best team in the NFL. The fact that they have one game left against Detroit and that Detroit's remaining schedule is a lot tougher than people are realizing, and the fact that just in general, Detroit's being talked about as, are they Super Bowl or bust now? And the goalposts have been moved aggressively because they have just thumped completely quitting teams. Okay. I kind of want to sell Detroit. And I think one of the ways to do that is to buy some Vikings North. The gap's not that broad. And if they get the head-to-head win, that's basically most of the equity that you could capture. And I don't think that that's a game that's totally out of reach for them. So I'm starting to believe that Minnesota I have them projected squarely as the 5 seed. There's very low likelihood that anyone's catching them for that seed that I could tell you. And they have a small chance to win the division still. But I do have an appetite right now to try to sell high on Detroit. And I do think that the Vikings is the obvious way to do it. The other obvious way to sell the Vikings would be to sell the Lions would be to buy the Eagles in the NFC, and I've been considering that as well. But there's something that still nags me about the Eagles in terms of the head coach. It's Hurts and Sirianni. It's Hurts. It's Sirianni. It's a little bit of Kellen Moore. There's a lot of characters who have let me down in life that I'm a little unprepared to get real serious about. But right now I only make the Lions 81% to win the division. And the way they're being talked about is like they're already the 1 seed.
Yeah. Nick Sirianni has taken such a strange heel turn. I remember going into the Super Bowl when he's crying in the national anthem, which was kind of an incredible, just artistic shot, a portrait of Nick Sirianni. And that was kind of the height of his likability because he had that amazing season, super aggressive on 4th down, kind of just 100% approval rating. And then when he started yelling at the Chiefs fans in the tunnel after they beat them, it's just been all downhill. And now he's just this comically unlikable figure. It has, turned precipitously against old Nick. With the Vikings, what do you think of Kevin O'Connell as a Coach of the Year candidate? Do you think he needs to win the division to be in the mix, given that it is I think it's a very strong field this year. Like guys like
really
Jim Harbaugh is 7-3 with the Chargers. He's exercised all the Chargers vibes, and he's like only the 4th favorite to win the award. That type of range. Mike Tomlin leading the division that has Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow in it. Dan Campbell is on a juggernaut, and it's going to have the greatest season in Detroit Lions history. Dan Quinn is going to go from 4 wins to it's a loaded field. Do you think that O'Connell, he has to win the division to be a legitimate candidate?
Yes. But he's got the same kind of hand that he's been dealt, the same hand that we kind of like when you're betting into awards markets, which is that he can kill Dan Campbell by beating him for the NFC North title. Again, I just feel here we are in the middle of November and the goalposts have been moved so aggressively on the Lions that if the Vikings do storm the castle and take a top 2 seed away from Detroit, Kevin O'Connell is absolutely in line to be considered. But you're right, the crowded nature of the Coach of the Year field right now is working against him. If the Tomlin holds on for the AFC North, which again I doubt, I want to sell that. I still think that he's going to be considered. You didn't even mention Sean Payton, but he's coached Bo Nix to the point where the Broncos are now, meaningful favorites in a lot of their remaining games. Yeah. So it's going to be a very fascinating race, and there is going to be some very annoying, high-profile wins in the month of December that swing this around the margins to the tune of somebody winning, and that is worth remembering when you are making and consuming content in the month of October and you're looking at Kevin O'Connell as a plus 200 favorite and you're like, best bet on the board is writing anyone Kevin O'Connell plus 200 because ultimately the the maturation of the season, it just forces these guys way up and down. And there was a clear, obvious sell high on O'Connell when he was undefeated. And I think there's a clear, obvious buy low on O'Connell right now. The question is just, do you get greedy and go for the coach of the year price or just take NFC North? And that's what I'm going to decide on today, one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, in most years, Kevin O'Connell winning the NFC North from this position and toppling the Lions would be a walk-in for Coach of the Year. But there are still worlds where Dan Quinn wins 12 games, Jim Harbaugh wins 13 games, Mike Tomlin wins 13 games and is a division winner. Maybe O'Connell beats all of those, but I don't think it's an absolute lock. The one guy who is around the top, in the top tier, at least odds-wise, who I don't really buy as a candidate, Jonathan Gannon is just too short, I think, even though it's a great story. Yeah. The team is 6-4. He's a defensive coordinator. That's his background. They don't have a great defense. And I just think that Kyler Murray is the story of that team. Mm-hmm. I don't think people are looking at the Cardinals and being like, Jonathan Gannon, the way that they look.
What a job.
Yeah, the way they look at the Steelers and think of Mike Tomlin, the way they look at the Chargers and think of Harbaugh, the way they, even like Dan Campbell, now that Jared Goff has, for the most part, kindly withdrawn from the MVP race and Campbell is a bit more front and center, I make the Lions plus 186 to win 15 plus games. That's where they're at the moment. And so 15-2 Dan Campbell, particularly if in week 17 he goes into San Francisco and wins on Monday Night Football as his coronation spot to clinch the 1 seed and get a 14th or 15th win at that point. I think that would be pretty tough to beat as a Coach of the Year candidate. And so I think he is probably the most likely guy to win. But when you're on these juggernaut teams, it only takes one random loss to the Bears or something, and then you're just completely cooked. So, I think it's a fairly wide open and compelling race.
I would even say that Monday Night Football game is a potential eliminator for Campbell. If he loses on the road to the Niners, game that none of us expect. Yeah, the preseason line was San Francisco -6. Yeah. Now he's expected to win.
Yeah, the only one. Yeah, if he loses that, he would be cooked most likely, unless he's 14-1 going into that, and the game is meaningless, and he's already been coronated. But yeah, he will very likely need to win that game. But I mean, at this point, the Lions might be favored in that game in San Francisco, or at least be around pick. We'll see what San Francisco's health is like. All right, this Sunday night, 2 teams battle for playoff positioning when Jalen Hurts and the Eagles fly west for a clash with Matthew Stafford and the Rams. Coverage of the matchup begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, let's close out with Thursday Night Football, Steelers-Browns. Steelers 3.5-point favorites in Cleveland. Line is down from 4.5. Drew, as you prognosticated on Sunday night that it would drop, the total is 36.5. I got to say, it feels good that the world has conspired in the past few years where I've just been constantly against the Steelers for whatever reason. But this year, for whatever reason, it just kind of shook out that I was really high on Steelers division, Steelers to make the playoffs in the early weeks of the season. I have no TJ Watt Defensive Player of the Year, and I may end up taking a bath on that. But for the most part, it has felt good to be on the right side of Mike Tomlin's magic. Do you think that the magic train keeps rolling here and they take care of business against Cleveland?
They probably do. And I would look mostly to the injury status of a lot of these key Brown players, notably Denzel Ward. The Browns defense has taken as big a step back as any team, any unit. That's not the Cowboys this season. Right now, they're 20th in EPA per play. As it always feels like with the Browns, they have a trouble finding takeaways. And if you screen out turnovers, they're more like an average defense. But this was like number one with the bullet type of a unit last year by every metric with a very tough schedule. And it's just not happening this year, particularly with the run defense. This is a bad run defense, and they're up against a good run scheme. Art Smith is doing some really nice things with, the two-headed monster he has there and an offensive line that's played well above what was expected this season. And that's being balanced out with a deep passing attack that doesn't pass the eye test at all, feels very defendable, but it is enough of a threat that does open up some easy buttons over the middle, and it does open up a lot in the running game for the Steelers. And so it's a pretty balanced and sustainable system in general. They were pretty miserable in the red zone against the Ravens, and I am surprised I haven't heard this more, but we've had now 2 wins this season for the Steelers where all they did was kick field goals. That feels very improbable, and I think they're going to have to score.
They're not very good.
They're not very good, but they're good enough, and I think that's kind of where I would stand as far as betting this game, which is 3.5 is a big number, and particularly for a road team, and particularly for divisional matchup where there's so much known between these opponents. These games are typically quite tight, and I think that just in general, if Denzel Ward plays, if the Browns are on the healthier side as opposed to what we saw with their practice report Monday, then they're going to be competitive. They could win this game, and they'll certainly cover 3.5. But I still have an open wound from what happened in the second half against the Saints and the degree to which the Browns defense doesn't necessarily look like they have 4 quarters in them anymore. Which is a problem. The Taysom Hill show being that successful at this stage is not a good sign. If your gadget fluky quarterback is capable of doing it, then the way Russell Wilson's playing right now is capable of doing it, and you don't have any matchup for Pickens if Ward's unavailable. So that's kind of the key injury that I'm following here before kind of firing one way or the other. But this is clearly Cleveland or pass. I don't think realistically you can make a case that the Steelers ought to be favored by more than 3.5. And this is now the 6th-ish week in a row I would have said something like this, and I think they've covered almost all of those games. So I'm eating a healthy amount of crow here, even talking about the Steelers. But their defense is overrated by the market. It is. Their offense is kind of the reason that they're able to squeak out some of these wins. The Tomlin voodoo is started as a joke, but it feels kind of like there is something funky going on with the way that they are catching some breaks. And it may just be as simple as like the team plays hard, and it's not obviously just luck that you happen to recover the fumbles. It's not obviously just luck that you happen to, get under your opponent's skin and they take a bad penalty at the wrong time. It's not just luck that, you have the right defense called on the 2-point conversion to the point of confusing your opponent, getting them to switch the plays into just a completely useless, 2-point attempt that decides the game in your favor. Like, that's good coaching and hard play. And the Steelers are, it's easy to hand wave that stuff because it's such soft and difficult to quantify. But with the Steelers, for whatever reason, it is real.
Yeah, the thing with Tomlin, so when I ask people around the league around like, why is Mike Tomlin, how does this keep happening? I get the same answer every time, and that is that I'm told that people don't appreciate how much Mike Tomlin is like an outlier, savant type of defensive X and O's genius. And that just bears out. And for some reason, I think people don't understand that Mike Tomlin's a really good defensive coach, but he's not talked about in the same light as like the way Belichick was. But I think people think that, he is kind of in that realm of defensive mind historically in the NFL. And I think it bore out against the Ravens. That's as mortal as Lamar Jackson has looked all season. And Lamar Jackson every season against the Steelers seems like he has his worst games. And the Steelers, the defense is very solid. I don't think it's a top 3-4 type of defense, but I think it's a top 7 or 8 type of defense. And then the offense, I just think the offense isn't very good. But Russ is competent enough, the run game is competent enough that they can get kind of approaching average. And if you've got an above average defense, an almost average offense, and you're very well coached and you win around the margins and you get a little bit lucky, that's how they are where they are at the moment. But that's also why, they're only 3.5-point favorites against the Jameis Winston team that just lost by 3 touchdowns to the Saints or whatever.
Hey, it was closer than the final score, Jack.
Yeah, was it? Yeah, I can tune into a lot of that one. So the most interesting thing to me about the Browns is just the reasons why their defense would have regressed. And everyone, I think it's kind of established conventional wisdom. The defense is much more variable year to year and less stable than offense. Like if you have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen as your quarterback, you're just going to have a really good offense every year. But defensively, the Jets spent 2 years as an elite defense, and now they're kind of a miniature disaster. You think back to like the 2018 Bears, that Matt Nagy team that was an all-time great defense. And then the next year with largely the same personnel, they dropped back to being, a very good but not amazing defense. With the Browns, so the Browns last year, I think they were 5th in turnovers generated on defense, and this year they're 3rd last. So that's a lot of it. But even when you strip turnovers out, last year they were still the number 1 defense by EPA per play by margin, tier 1 by themselves. This year you strip turnovers out and they're 13th. Do you think it's just that teams are just... And with the Browns, it's kind of strange because they don't really have a defensive scheme. It's more like the Jim Schwartz thing is just, you kind of play everything straight up and you just go talent v talent. And that can get burned like it did against the Texans in the playoffs. But do you think that just the personnel has just been a little bit more injured, a little bit older across the board, and just those ripple effects have eradicated the margins that Schwartz was playing last year with from a talent perspective?
Yeah, and I would add, I think that's 100% correct analysis, and I would add to the mix the offense being even more prone to 3-and-out this year. The Browns lead the NFL in punts. Like this team is the offense. It, consistently puts the defense back on the field, and the wear and tear of that. The wear and tear, and I like this is theory now. This is not like I can point to the data that suggested, but I feel like the Jets defense broke because of how aggressively they had to just carry the team during the Zach Wilson era, and that just broke them down. And I think a lot of the same thing happened earlier this season with the Browns defense carrying the Deshaun Watson offense, and now, there are moments, particularly in first halves of games, where you watch this Browns defense and you're like, wow, like, whoa, look out. And then by the end of the game, they've conceded 35 points, and it's because they gave explosive plays to Taysom Hill, right? And there is also a whiff of they've been solved, right? The fact that, offenses go into a game against the Browns and they're like, we're going to mix in a handful of explosive shots. And if those hit, they're going to hit hard. And I think teams kind of know that you're not going to get by with sort of the common approach for current offense in the NFL, which is cross the street 15 times on your way to a touchdown. If you try that against the Browns, you're in trouble. Like, they're eventually going to get the key stop that, forces you into punt or a field goal. But if you mix in a little bit higher propensity for explosive offense against this team, it works. And assuming you can pull those off. Now, if you can't pull them off, you're going to look bad. But I think to a degree, that's sort of the the go-to plan when you're up against a Brown squad. Now, as we look at this game, and particularly the total, we've seen 39 get bet down to 36.5. Well, a lot of my questions are really kind of about health on the Brown side of the football, but this to me spells somebody is projecting a little bit higher wind. Cleveland in the month of November, not a particularly nice place to play when it's windy. And right now we're staring at something like right around freezing point with 15-mile-an-hour winds. If there is wind, you know what that impacts? It impacts the Russell Wilson, drop the cherry in the bucket from the Skycam. And I think that could be a factor here for Browns in terms of keeping their defense from giving up the explosive plays. So I'm going to bet the Browns here. I'm waiting for today's injury report to just kind of crystallize my opinion, but the weather, I'm hopeful, is likely to help Cleveland and hurt Pittsburgh in this one.
Okay, so vibes-based analysis. This is either the game where TJ Watt, who I don't think I've ever bet on for Defensive Player of the Year, it is my top two mortal enemy, along with Jimmy Butler, the man who has cost me the most money of all time, but who I begrudgingly expect because Jimmy Butler is my father. So TJ Watt, this is the type of game where he just gets 2.5 sacks, forced fumble, prime time, and then he's minus 300 for DPOI after the game. This is also the type of game, though, that the Steelers lose 20-17. And it's the stupid Steelers game where it's like, oh, we just beat the Ravens, or 8-2 in the division. No, this is like the Kenny Pickett game against the Cardinals last year or whatever, where it just kind of all burns. So I don't know what is going to happen, but I would lean to Cleveland at 3.5. I think that the combination of how fraudulent I think the Steelers offense is and how dependent it's been on these Russ deep balls. Russ isn't very good. Like the interception that he threw that almost cost the game against the Ravens, like that's atrocious. And they didn't score a touchdown the entire game against the Ravens pass defense that has been flammable all year. And Jameis, who I don't really like and has a number of balls, can at least move the ball down the field, and he is the type of kind of high variance operator I think you want in a game like this. He's 14th in PFF grade, James Winston. And even though him beating the Ravens was an absolute travesty that I will never forgive Kyle Hamilton for dropping that pick, he still can. Like he's the type of guy you want to go to war with as an underdog, Jameis, because he is the ultimate variance luck box machine. I think the Browns defense as well. So long as they can put out a modicum of health, I think they can give Russ some issues. All right. We are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From myself and Drew Dinsick, thanks again to you, Louise Heel. We'll see you soon.